Welcome to Rock and Reddit. Let's get started, and don't forget to like and subscribe. When did your feeling about something is very wrong here turned out to be true? Very would be an exaggeration, but after my mother went to bed each night my dad would go out to his car beside the driveway and talk on the phone for about 15 minutes. I outed him. He had been having an affair for about 10 years. 10 freaking years. My dad was 6. Dad heard a clap of thunder and immediately told the babysitter to call someone because my dad's been struck by lightning. My grandfather had in fact been struck directly by lightning while playing golf with my grandmother. The electricity entered his shoulder and out his ankle. My grandmother resuscitated my grandfather and he lived to be over 90. After reading so many of these for the past few hours, this one struck me as the most electrifying what the fuck moment on here. Woke up one morning and our Aussie, a dog that slept every day of his 13 years on the bed with us, wasn't next to me. I felt a stab of panic that I tried to rationalize. He's just napping on the floor or outside peeing but it wouldn't go away. I got up and found him lying on the patio, but otherwise normal. That evening, though, he wouldn't eat. 24 hours later the vet suspected meningitis or something similar, and we had to say goodbye. Such a gut punch. Even still. Edit. Holy moly, my first gold. Thank you, kind stranger. I wish it were for a happier post, but it's still awesome. Went on a cruise with my family when I was 23. Before I left I was saying goodbye to my cats. The older one was 18, but in good health. As I was saying goodbye to her though, something inside me felt like I knew this the last time I would see her. A couple days later, I got a call from my friend who was watching my cats. The old cat had started puking up blood, so she was put down. I wept pretty hard that day, but I was grateful that a part of me knew to say goodbye like it was the last time. I befriended an elderly man after a middle school project about WWII. He served on the US San Francisco, and I continued to visit with him weekly or so all the way through high school. His house was on the way home from school and I would often call to tell him I was coming and then drop by after practice. Being a 92-year-old man, he didn't have a ton going on, but occasionally had appointments and such that took him out of the house. One day I called and he didn't pick up the phone. Not super strange, given the aforementioned appointments, but I just had this sinking feeling in my chest that no matter how long I waited, he was going to pick up the phone. Got a call the next day from my middle school teacher, who also regularly checked in with him, telling me that he had passed away. I got to speak at his service and I'll always remember our time together. R.I.P. Gene. I was accidentally given a massive morphine overdose in hospital. I was in the process of being moved from one ward to another and knew there was a really good chance I would be left alone for a while because the staff were really busy. I could feel myself becoming amazingly, intensely relaxed and trying to keep myself awake enough to let a staff member know what had happened and how I'd been overdosed. Was given 10 mls of morphine rather than 0.5 mls. Was really hard. It kinda sucked that they didn't believe me, but once I let them know that I was a midwife and I wasn't kidding around they took me seriously. The next few hours including a medical emergency team call are very hazy in my mind. My grandma and I were in the Corolla. She was driving. When the light turned green at a traffic light stop, she paused for about 4 seconds, enough to get the car behind us to honk. When I told her to go, she told me to wait. Something felt out of place. Then, out of the blue, an Impala blasted through the intersection. Had we actually gone when the light turned green, the Impala would have T-boned us. Apparently my grandma first learned to ride a boat, then a moped, and then a car. A huge part of driving a boat is to have foresight, because boats don't stop as quickly as a car. Made her a wonderful driver and could park perfectly, drive perfectly, and unlike most grandmas, she's not a slowpoke driver, just cautious and super predictable to others. Came home very late one night. My parents and sister were already asleep. House felt funny. Dogs were barking in a strange way. Looked around and noticed that my stepmother's car was not in the driveway, but her purse was in the kitchen. My dad's wallet was not on its usual place. Caught someone creeping around in the backyard. The commotion woke everyone up. Creeper was one of my sister's friends. Turns out, her friends decided to break in due to the fact that my parents never locked the doors and the dogs all knew them, steal my dad's cash and credit cards, and take my stepmother's car for a joyride. Since she drove a Toyota Corolla, I have no idea why. We found the car in the next subdivision. Why was the creeper boy not with his buddies? He figured he could double back and spend some quality time with my sister, and my timing was just about perfect. He ended up rolling on his buddies and getting a reduced sentence. His parents were pissed at me more for injuring their little boy than they were at him for breaking into people's houses and stealing cars. I was walking back to my dorm from class and had a gut feeling that I needed to see my friend right away. I walked into his dorm room and found him on the floor seizing. He is fine now, but it was still weird that I just knew something was wrong before I had seen him at all that day. Maybe you're actually a service dog. My wife and I were renting for a few years when we decided to take the steps to buy our own house. We had enough for a deposit and had a mortgage quote arranged. We went to look at a number of houses and found one that we really liked, so decided to put our offer in. We were told that this was most likely going to be accepted, but they were going to wait a couple of days before deciding. That evening I sat in bed reading when I had a horrible feeling that something wasn't right. The next day I told my wife that I wasn't sure about it and convinced her that we needed to retract our offer, so we did. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. Within 2 days of pulling out of this offer, my wife was made redundant, totally by surprise, and she hadn't been working at the company long enough to get much of a payout. A week later our car broke down and was beyond repair, barring spending more than the car was worth. We really struggled for the next year or so and would never have been able to pay off a mortgage. We are in a much better place now, but we know that if I hadn't had that moment we would have been screwed. When I was in college I had a really weird class and work schedule that resulted in me usually taking my dog for her nightly walk around 3 or so in the morning. There was a giant parking structure for the college right by its baseball field, and I would usually cut through there and let my dog run around on the field before circling back to my apartment. One night on the way over, I heard a faint humming in the parking garage, followed by some sort of weird, almost alarm sounding noise. Being the horror movie victim that I am, I started walking towards the sound, which meant walking down to the lowest level, which was one below street level. When I got down to the ramp my dog started to get visibly stressed, whining and sort of bouncing around, looking at me repeatedly. I started to really get stressed out at this point, but pressed on. When I got down the ramp, I looked around and saw behind it a small golf cart, which on its own wasn't that weird because the school's maintenance staff use them all the time. This golf cart, however, was on and running, which was producing the humming noise, but with no driver. I walked over to it, and behind it was one of the Home Depot buckets tipped over, with trash scattered around. Before I could really wonder what was going on, I heard the alarm sort of sound again, only this time I recognized it. I went a little further around to the elevators, and found a man unconscious inside one, blocking the door, which was repeatedly trying to close but couldn't. Once I was down there near it, I knew what the sound was, because we used to block it in the dorms all the time waiting for friends. At this point my dog was going nuts. I put her leash over one of those parking poles to stop people from hitting things and approached the man. I didn't know CPR at the time, but I checked if he was breathing. He was, so I quickly called 911. Fortunately I had service, and the campus police station was literally a 2-minute walk from there. A couple police officers arrived quickly and began to administer CPR, and an ambulance arrived shortly after. I had to hang around for a while and explain what happened. The stressful part was not finding out if he was okay until several days later. I called the campus police station and they said they couldn't share his specific medical situation, but told me he was okay and would likely return to work at some point. I'm guessing he had a heart attack, but I'll never know for sure. I never saw him again. Kind of a dumb one, but we had this regular customer who was very weird. I worked in an auto wrecking yard, and he always came in and bought random, off the wall shit. In a hoe, me and a new guy load some stuff into the back of this guy's van. He gets in to leave, and new guy is standing behind the van next to the building. I say, hey, I wouldn't stand there. New guy looks at me puzzled and moves. Sure enough, weird customer puts it in reverse and punches it. Backs right through the wall of our office. Cool. A new door, directly to the office. Free of charge. XGF didn't come to bed at a normal time, but knew she was still in the house, just in a different room watching some TV or something similar. This was a somewhat common occurrence and I usually just went straight to sleep, but this time I just couldn't get comfortable sleeping, and had a sense of dread. I had about an hour of fitful sleep, and woke up to her still not there, and the sound of loading screen music coming from the other room. So I got up and sure enough, I heard a very faint sound coming from the basement and long story short, she was banging who I considered a friend in the basement, and I sat there for 5 minutes at the top of the stairs listening to them talk about their dirty little secret. IDK how many other times they banged, or how many other guys, but you can imagine things ended shortly after that. Damn, she did that with you in the house. That's just cold. Edit. Apparently this is common. What the duck, world. I was letting my dog back inside. She walked right past me with no tail wagging or happy smile, walked right through the kitchen without wanting a treat, and went straight to a doggy bed. I knew something wasn't right, and within 10 minutes we were in the car to the emergency vet. She had a tumor rupture apparently. It was clear what needed to be done. Still breaks my heart. Went through a similar thing happen in early November. One of my dogs was outside. It was late, and I was letting the other dogs out. I called him over, and he barely moved. Just kind of looked at me, but not the I'm really tired look. I looked at my husband, and said something isn't right. We got him inside. He was acting weird. He didn't eat that day, but I didn't think too much of it at the time, because he was still acting normal. We took him to the emergency vet. He had an enlarged heart and liver. They said they couldn't do anything. We took him home that night. Got up around 9 AM the next day. Took him to our primary vet to be euthanized. He died while waiting on my husband's feet. I had my hand on his chest, and I felt his last heartbeat. Still cry every time I think about it. I think it's only been a little over a month, but it's so hard. We got him cremated. He sleeps on my end table next to my bed. Today, I work as a nurse and I took handover on a patient who had a little dizziness, a little nausea and a swollen abdomen. She was fairly bright, able to talk, nothing seemed too horrific. But she was turning a grim grey color and breathing quickly. Our average wait time today was 2 hours. I could have put her back in the queue and moved on, but I had a little dark feeling that there was something sinister happening here. So I called our most senior doctor out of a consultation and asked him to see her. Right fucking now. Ever heard of your abdominal aorta? Enormous blood vessel that can pouch out, suddenly rupture, and make you bleed internally to death in minutes? It's called a burst AAA, abdominal aortic aneurysm. You've heard of it now. That's what she had. I've never seen one before, but now I have. Within 5 minutes she was barely responding. Within 10 her blood pressure had dropped to a barely sustainable level. Within 20 minutes I was pouring blood into her, and 8 people were around the bed. Within an hour she was on an operating table clinging to life. But because I raised the alarm, and because my team worked our asses off, that woman is still, somehow, alive. Feels good, man. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment the moments when your feeling about something turned out to be true below. Stay hydrated, and don't let your memes be dreams.